Every mystery begins with a question: a missing person, a forgotten object, a strange event buried in history. Sometimes the answers are hidden, sometimes they're never found, and sometimes the truth is stranger than anything we could imagine. Welcome to the Unexplained Archives. This is a collection of mysteries, crimes, legends, and unexplained stories from around the world. Tonight's story begins in Portland, Oregon, 1981. The arcade scene was at its absolute peak. Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Centipede, every convenience store, every pizza parlor, every bowling alley had machines lined up along the walls, eating quarters and filling rooms with electronic noise. Then, sometime in the autumn of 1981, a new machine appeared in several arcades in the Portland area. It was called Polybius. Nobody knew who made it. There was no manufacturer's label, no distributor sticker. The cabinet was dark, with a simple title screen and a gameplay style that witnesses have described as unlike anything else they had ever seen. Players reported that it was addictive in a way that felt different from normal games, that they could not stop playing, that they lost track of time in front of it. Then they started reporting other things: nightmares, amnesia, seizures, extreme stress responses. Some players reportedly stopped playing games entirely and never returned to the arcades. And the machine, according to the people who say they remember it, was regularly serviced by men in black suits who were not affiliated with any game company anyone had heard of. Men who were collecting coins, men who appeared to be collecting data. And then, within a few months of appearing, every Polybius machine in Portland was gone. No announcement, no recall, no trace. The game has never been officially confirmed to exist. No verified cabinet has ever been found. No manufacturer has ever claimed it. And yet, the legend of Polybius has grown for over 40 years into one of the most persistent and fascinating mysteries in gaming culture. The legend as it exists today rests on a cluster of core claims that have been repeated, embellished, and passed down through gaming communities since the early 2000s. Here are the claims as stated by believers. Number 1. In 1981, multiple arcade cabinets bearing the name Polybius appeared in Portland, Oregon, specifically in the Beaverton area. Number 2. The game was extraordinarily addictive, producing obsessive play behavior in a short period of exposure. Number 3. Players experienced significant adverse effects, including memory loss, insomnia, nightmares, and in some reported cases, seizures and hallucinations. Number 4. The machines were regularly visited by government agents, described as men in dark suits, who appeared to be downloading or collecting data from the machines rather than maintaining them. Number 5. The machines disappeared completely within weeks or months of their appearance, with no explanation from any game manufacturer or distributor. Number 6. The game was a secret government experiment, possibly related to MK Ultra, the CIA's documented mind control program designed to test the psychological effects of certain visual patterns and sounds on unwitting subjects. That is the story. Now let's look at where it comes from. The word Polybius does not appear in any documented gaming industry record from 1981. No trade publication, no manufacturer catalog, no distributor's list. No arcade operators inventory from Portland in that year contains the name. The earliest verifiable appearance of the Polybius legend in digital form is a website called coinoff.org, an online database of arcade games, where an entry for a game called Polybius was submitted by an anonymous user in 1998. The entry described the game, its alleged effects, and the mysterious men in black suits. From that single anonymous submission in 1998, the legend spread. It was picked up by early internet gaming communities, it appeared in Creepypasta collections, it was referenced in a 2006 episode of The Simpsons. It entered the cultural bloodstream. But here is where it gets genuinely interesting. The person who submitted that coin-op entry has never been definitively identified. The submission has never been verified. And the detail it contains, the specific Portland locations, the government agents, the adverse health effects, appear nowhere in any 1981 documentation. So is Polybius simply a hoax? a piece of internet mythology created from nothing in 1998. Possibly, but not certainly, because the hoax theory has some uncomfortable holes in it. 1981 Portland, Oregon was a real and active arcade market. Machines came and went regularly. The industry was moving fast. New titles appeared and disappeared all the time as operators chased the next big hit. Oregon in the late 1970s and early 1980s was also home to some genuinely unusual government activity. The Hanford nuclear site was active, defense contractors had a significant presence in the Pacific Northwest, and the legacy of MKUltra, which had been exposed in congressional hearings in 1977, had demonstrated that the United States government had, within living memory, conducted secret psychological experiments on unwitting citizens. Now, this context matters. The Polybius legend did not emerge in a vacuum. It emerged in a specific place and time where the idea of government experimentation via ordinary consumer products was not entirely without precedent. Two real arcade games from the early 1980s are frequently cited as possible inspirations for the Polybius legend. The first is Tempest, an Atari vector graphics game from 1980 that was genuinely associated with seizure reports in some players due to its intense visual strobing effects. Atari received documented complaints about Tempest. The game was real, the complaints were real, and the visual characteristics of Tempest, pulsing geometric shapes at high contrast, are consistent with photosensitive seizure triggers. The second is Cube Quest, a 1983 Laserdisc game that was rumored to cause dizziness and disorientation in some arcades. Less documented than the Tempest reports, but part of the same cultural conversation about arcade games and health effects that was active in the early 1980s. Neither of these games were called Polybius, but both of them demonstrate that the idea of arcade games causing adverse health effects was not invented whole cloth. It was grounded in real documented phenomena. The CIA's MKUltra program ran from 1953 to 1973. Its existence was exposed in 1975 by the Church Committee, a Senate investigation into intelligence agency abuses, and confirmed in 1977 through the release of thousands of documents. MKUltra involved testing of drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and psychological manipulation on unwitting subjects, including prisoners, psychiatric patients, and members of the general public who had no idea they were being experimented on. The program used ordinary locations as cover: hospitals, universities, and in at least one documented case, a safe house furnished to look like a normal residence. Here is the critical point. MKUltra was not science fiction. It was not a conspiracy theory. It was a real program officially acknowledged by the United States government that used unwitting civilians as test subjects. The program was officially terminated in 1973, but intelligence community skeptics have always pointed out that the termination of a classified program is only as verifiable as the documents we have access to. In the context of Polybius, MKUltra matters for one specific reason. It establishes that the idea of the US government secretly testing psychological manipulation techniques on civilians using disguised delivery systems is not a paranoid fantasy. It is documented fact. That does not prove Polybius was a government experiment, but it means the claim is not categorically absurd. Looking back on 2026, the most interesting aspect of Polybius may not be whether it existed. It may be the fact that many of its central fears now feel strangely familiar. The idea of technology designed to maximize engagement. The idea of systems that learn user behavior. The idea of digital experiences engineered to keep people interacting for as long as possible. None of this requires a government conspiracy. In many ways, it describes ordinary modern technology. Over the years, several people have come forward claiming to have memories of Polybius in Portland in 1981. These accounts have been collected by researchers, gaming historians, and journalists. The accounts share certain characteristics. They describe a dark cabinet, an unusual and intensely compelling gameplay experience, and a sense of disorientation after playing. Some describe seeing other players become obsessed. A few mention the men in suits. Now here is the problem with witness testimony in a case like this. By the time most of these accounts were collected in the early 2000s, the coin.org entry had circulated widely. It is impossible to determine whether the witnesses were describing genuine memories from 1981 or memories that had been shaped by exposure to the legend itself. Memory is not a recording, it's a reconstruction. And when a compelling story is told often enough, it can create the conditions for false memories that are subjectively indistinguishable from real ones. But this does not mean the witnesses are lying. It means we cannot know whether they are accurately remembering Polybius, accurately remembering a different game that they have retrospectively associated with Polybius, or remembering something that didn't happen in the way they believe it did. One witness, however, is worth particular attention. Stephen Roach, the name used in the most detailed early account, described playing Polybius in Beaverton in 1981 and experiencing significant psychological distress, including nightmares and what he described as an inability to stop thinking about the game. His account is more detailed and more consistent than most others, but it too has never been independently verified and Stephen Roach has never been publicly identified. The simplest explanation for Polybius, it never existed. A person or persons unknown submitted a fabricated entry in 1998 to coinoff.org inventing a game with suitably sinister backstory and the internet did the rest. The timing supports this. 1998 was the early days of gaming nostalgia culture, a moment when people were beginning to catalog and mythologize the arcade era, and when a compelling story about a lost and dangerous game from that era would find a receptive audience. The creator of the hoax, if it was a hoax, chose their details carefully. Polybius was the name of an ancient Greek historian known for writing about secret military codes, a subtle nod that would reward a classically educated reader. The Portland setting was specific enough to feel real but far enough from major media centers that it could not be easily checked. The government conspiracy angle gave the story depth and connected it to real documented history. If this was a hoax, it was a well-constructed one. But the hoax theory requires us to believe that every witness account that followed was either fabricated in response to the legend or the result of misidentification and false memory. That is plausible, but not certain. A more nuanced possibility is that Polybius was a real game, or a real category of game that existed briefly in Portland in 1981 but under a different name or in an unlicensed form. The early arcade industry was full of unlicensed manufacturers, bootleg cabinets, and grey market operators who built machines using components from multiple sources. An unlicensed or prototype game built by a small operator and placed in a few arcades without proper licensing would leave almost no paper trail. If such a game had visual characteristics like strobing effects or intense geometric patterns that triggered adverse health responses in some players, and if its unusual provenance caused it to disappear quickly when its operators were confronted by industry regulators, the result would be exactly what the Polybius legend describes: a game that appeared, caused problems, and vanished. The men in suits in this reading were not government agents, they were either the operators collecting their unlicensed machines or representatives of a company protecting a proprietary prototype. This theory accounts for all the physical characteristics of the legend without requiring a government conspiracy. It is the most parsimonious explanation, but it is not the most interesting one. If Polybius was a government experience, what would the purpose have been? The most commonly cited hypothesis was that the game was designed to test the psychological effects of specific visual and audio patterns on human subjects, specifically their ability to cause addiction, compliance, or psychological destabilization. In the early 1980s, the US military and intelligence community had documented interests in several related areas: acoustic and optical stressors, sounds and light patterns capable of inducing specific psychological states were an active area of research. The idea of using entertainment technology as a delivery mechanism for behavioral modification had theoretical support within certain research communities. An arcade game would be a nearly perfect delivery system. It was designed to be used repetitively. It was targeted at young people who tend to be more neuroplastic and thus more susceptible to conditioning. It was placed in public spaces with no documentation or informed consent, and it could be removed instantly, leaving no trace. If this was the purpose of Polybius, it worked in at least one direction. The men in suits collecting data from the machines would have been downloading records of who played, for how long, how many times they returned, and potentially physiological responses during play. if the machines were equipped with biometric sensors which were technologically feasible by 1981. Is there any evidence that this happened? No, there is no document, no whistleblower, no FOIA release that confirms a government program called Polybius or anything like it. But MKUltra was not confirmed for 22 years, and when it was confirmed, it was more extreme than almost anyone had imagined. The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Whatever Polybius was or wasn't in 1981, it became something very real after 1998. The coin of entry seeded a mythology that grew with extraordinary vitality through the early internet era. Gaming forums in the early 2000s treated Polybius as established fact. Creepypasta collections used it as a foundational text. Entire websites were devoted to tracking down the game. In 2006, The Simpsons featured a Polybius machine in an episode called Please Homer, Don't Hammer Him. It was the moment the legend crossed from gaming subculture into mainstream awareness. A documentary film about the legend was produced. Multiple YouTube channels have devoted hours to investigating it. In 2017, a developer released an official Polybius game for PlayStation VR, a virtual reality game designed to look and feel like what the legend described. It was made by Jeff Minter, a respected British game developer who said he was not claiming the original game existed but wanted to create the experience the legend described. There are now physical Polybius arcade cabinets built by enthusiasts based on descriptions from the legend displayed at gaming museums and conventions. The game that may never have existed has generated more physical artifacts than most games that definitely did. This is the paradox of Polybius. It may be the most successful video game that was never made. Despite decades of investigation, no verified cabinet has ever surfaced. No manufacturer has claimed ownership. No employee has come forward with documentation. No photograph from 1981 has been authenticated. Polybius remains unusual because the internet has successfully found evidence of countless obscure arcade games, yet the deeper researchers dig into Polybius, the more elusive it becomes. The Polybius legend has survived for over 40 years in a media environment that is uniquely hostile to unchecked myth. The early internet age that gave it life also gave rise to the fact-checking culture, the Snopes era, the archive culture that should have been able to kill a story with no documentation. It didn't. Polybius keeps being retold. Why? I think there are two reasons and they work together. The first is that the legend captures something true about the nature of addictive game design. Anyone who has lost hours to a video game, who has looked up from a screen and been shocked to find that it is 3 in the morning, knows that certain games have a power over human attention that feels qualitatively different from other entertainment. The idea that this power could be weaponized is not absurd, it's intuitive. The second reason is darker. The legend emerged in the specific aftermath of MKUltra's exposure. The revelation that MKUltra was real did not create the paranoia that fuels legends like Polybius, it validated it. Polybius is not just a gaming legend, it is a story about what we are willing to believe our institutions are capable of. And the answer, after MKUltra, is quite a lot. There is a version of this story that ends simply. A bored person invented a fake video game in 1998 and 20 years later, Jeff Minter made it real. Mystery solved, move on. I don't find that version satisfying. Not because I believe in the government conspiracy, I don't particularly, but because I think the legend of Polybius is doing something important that a simple debunking misses. It is processing real anxiety about technology and addiction, about the power of corporations and governments over our attention and our mind, about the way that entertainment can be a vector for things we didn't consent to. Those anxieties are more relevant today than they were in 1981. The debate about social media addiction, algorithmic manipulation, and the deliberate engineering of compulsive behavior in digital products is not a fringe concern. It is front page news. It has become a story about attention. And that's where the trail goes forth. Whatever the explanation may be, the questions remain. And as long as they do, the story continues. This channel is going to be home to a lot of stories like this one. Unsolved, unexplained, but always rooted in real people and real things. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay curious.